2014, a student from Skive, and I've probably pronounced it incorrectly, Julie, apologies. A small town a few hours out of Copenhagen in Denmark was delivered as our youth exchange responsibility. In that year, Julie was hosted by Rotary Melbourne and she primarily stayed with 4 host families: Joe's family, Mavrosses, the Hunters, Uramduses and Macintoshes, and was counselled by Jenny Tang. It's been some years since we posted a youth exchange, but due to our demographic, but the rewards are really obvious. So we've invited Julie to spend a couple of minutes to update us on her journey so far. So Julie, please come to the podium.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me to lunch today. So as said, I am Julie and I'm from Denmark. I was here 10 years ago as a youth exchange student, and a lot has happened since going back home. So except from moving from the city which I grew up in, I currently live in Copenhagen now. I have done some studies in economics and business administration. So first did my bachelor's and then a master degree specializing in, did the microphone go?
Yes.
I can just speak out loud. Is it okay if I speak like this? So I did, thank you, a master degree in economics and business administration, but specialized within information management. And I'm currently working at a Danish company called Ramble as a management consulting and have been there for the past 3 years now. So really feeling like an adult and no longer wandering around the student, the universe of a student. I'm actually working, but have the pleasure of taking a bit of time off now to come visit here, staying with my wonderful families and catching up with everyone. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And it's wonderful that you could join us here today for lunch and update us on your progress, because it's always, we always wonder. We wonder what happened to that wonderful youth exchange student. So it's great to see you back. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your time here in Melbourne and Australia. Just a few notices. We've got the Thomas Baker oration. Just a reminder, we've got our special guest, Megan Clark, AC, Chancellor of Monash University, former Director of the CSIRO and inaugural Head of the Australian Space Agency. We've got a good number of bookings, but don't miss out. Make sure you book your tables. Just on the members directory, we have an email going out just asking you to check your current details, making sure that we have our database correct. So if you could please turn that around for us. I also wanted to thank everyone for coming to the Immigration Museum event. We had about 30 of our members and partners, and Karen Kim did a wonderful job of organising that on Saturday just gone. And also a big thank you to Stephen Rando. We did the Run the Tan for mental health on Sunday. There was no danger of me being queen of the hill with the running, but we all did get there in the end, which is the main thing, and raised the profile of Rotary Melbourne amongst several thousand runners, which was wonderful. Right, I'll now hand over to our chair today, Rob McGirt, to take over the rest of the meeting. Okay, Rob.
Great, thanks very much, President Catherine. Well, it gives me great pleasure today to introduce our guest speaker, Andrew Laidlaw. So Andrew's lifelong passion is not only to work with nature, but to help others learn, enjoy, and find their own connection with the natural world. And he's been doing this for us Melburnians for over 28 years as a landscape architect at the Royal Botanic Gardens. He's designed and developed many different areas of the gardens, some of which he's going to talk about here today. And in 2020, he completed the current master plan, the gardens, for the next 20 years. Andrew has taught landscape design at the University of Melbourne. He's been a regular presenter on ABC 774 and a regular guest on Garden Australia. He's also won numerous awards for his design and work. The Victorian Landscape of the Year, gold medals for the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show. And he's worked with the Warrington Council to design and install 2 award-winning Being on Country gardens. But as well as all of that work, Andrew is one of the founding directors of an organisation, Global Gardens of Peace, which builds gardens for vulnerable communities, and he will also be talking about this. Global Gardens of Peace was making significant progress in recent years towards building a children's garden in the Gaza Strip. That was a pretty amazing and very ambitious venture. It was progressing really well, but obviously with the recent events, that has now been prevented. So one of my guests here today, who's already been introduced, is Bernie McInerney, and he's also one of the directors of Global Gardens of Peace, been involved in several of their projects. So I've known Andrew for many years, as I was involved in the early days of Global Gardens of Peace, and he kindly agreed to provide pro bono advice and support for the Peace Belts project. And I must say his ongoing advice and support was absolutely invaluable. As we were talking earlier on about how difficult it is to navigate the City of Melbourne, the council, and he knew all the difficulties, but he helped us by providing us with content, which was Jim Sharp, who was a guest today, but he hasn't made it. Also someone who's helped us with signs, but he's always there to help us and support us. And our application is still currently under consideration to make the bells permanent, and he's a supporter of that, goes the way he supports. So there's been great support for that project, and we've appreciated it. But finally, as well, he's a DMAT supporter. So he's obviously a very sensible person. So he's here to talk today about making the world a better place, one garden at a time. Andrew. Thank you, Rob.
It'd be working now. Give it a go.
Oh, I better take that one away. Can people hear me okay? No, it doesn't sound like it's working. I don't often need a microphone anyway, to be honest. So I've got a pretty booming voice, but thank you, Rob, and it's a privilege to be here with Rotary. And I've actually, over the years, through my daughter going to Denmark as a Rotary exchange student, and then more recently with our Global Gardens of Peace work, Rotary has been very supportive to us. And in fact, the garden we finished just in Thornbury in 2024 or 2023, Rotary were a really good partner with us in delivering a garden to a vulnerable community with Urella. So, but look, today I'm going to talk a little bit about my role at the Botanic Gardens, and then I'm going to talk about what we do at Global Gardens of Peace. So, you know, again, have I just lost volume? Oh, okay, seems to be coming and going a bit. But look, I've been very involved at the Botanic Gardens for 27 or 28 years, and it's been an absolute joy to be able to be involved in a garden like this. This garden, and I suppose from my life, I've married with 4 children, lost my wife a few years ago, but I've been really obsessed with connecting my children and their children's children, my grandchildren, to gardens and to nature. And gardens in many ways become one of the last places that people can actually find that connection, particularly in this world where we're losing touch all the time with a lot of the natural world through the digital worlds, particularly a lot of our children are living in. The other thing from my point of view, I'm always drawn to wild landscapes because I believe that's where our true connection is sometimes still found. So in the time I'm not working in the Botanic Gardens, I'm often looking for those sorts of experiences, and they're still out there, which is very important. But we are a world in crisis, and particularly here in Australia, climate changing. But you know, we are experiencing a big change at the moment: floods, fires, temperature increase. What's it again? Temperature increase are all things which actually are in our face at the moment. And with my work at the Botanic Gardens, we're not questioning the science. We actually are working with it, and we're looking at ways that garden is going to continually give to the people of Melbourne and be part of this mitigation, which is kind of working with that climate that is, we're expecting to be 4 to 5 degrees hotter in the next 100 years. So it's funny, but the work in the Botanic Gardens, that Botanic Garden sits as a green oasis in the middle of a huge heat bank of a city, which they're predicting will end up being 20 million, in the next 100 years. So this space becomes incredibly important as the lungs of the city, but also as an important biodiversity piece, not only for us as humans, but for all of the critters that live in the world. So the Botanic Gardens, and we here in Melbourne, I think most people, and I've lost the mic again, I'm going to get rid of it actually, Joe, because I think I'll just talk with a bit more volume. Can everybody hear me if I throw that voice a bit? Yeah, okay. So, and the other thing that's really exciting at the moment is that the science is there. The science is now telling us that just 40 seconds of exposure to green space can actually change your life. You know, it can actually improve your day. So, and they've done the work to say that, you know, things like greater learning outcomes, less domestic violence, better health outcomes, all are about exposure to green space. In fact, doctors are prescribing green space as a prescription. So, you know, rather than take drugs or, you know, put yourself on a machine, they're actually also including spend so many hours a week in green space. And the science actually shows you that if you're sitting in green space, there's a whole lot of things going on here that you don't see, which are actually improving your health. So the science is there. For a lot of us gardeners, we don't need that proof. I'm going to go without the mic, Joe. Yeah. We don't need that proof, but because of the science, we're actually finding that we're actually attracting more funding for green infrastructure. And can I tell you a little story? The state government 4 or 5 years ago invested $90 million in health and wellbeing centres around Victoria, and not 1 cent was spent on green space. You go into a hospital and they're spending millions of dollars, and I'm not criticising hospitals because of the budget problems they have, but they invest nothing into green space. And the green space outcomes, with the science is showing, you can get amazing results by spending such a small amount on what some of those outcomes can be. And some of the work Global Gardens of Peace are doing is actually trying to get into some of those institutions and build gardens that are loved, that are cared for, and that actually connect to people and help their health and well-being. We'll go back to the Botanic Gardens. So it is an amazing, can everybody see that okay? So it's 86 acres. It was set down by Charles de Trobe in 1846. And it is a colonial construct. So while it's over 175 years old, there's a deeper history. And I would like to acknowledge today that we are working and living and giving this talk on Wurundjeri country. And in the Botanic Gardens, one of my major challenges at the moment is to actually work with the Wurundjeri people and actually start to explore the deeper history of that place. Because it's a colonial construct, it means that it's very much about growing plants, showing people about plants, and it's an adult language. It was designed, you know, originally to explore plants we could grow in this environment to actually try and create commercial crops out of it. It's changed, but really before that, and for 50,000 years, it's been an incredibly important swamp and hunting ground for the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong people. So I would like to acknowledge the elders, past, present, and into the future of the lands that we all live on. And anybody that's gardening, we are changing and shaping country. And the other thing I'd like to bring here is that the Botanic Gardens, while it's a colonial construct, we have actually been caring for country for 175 years as well. So there is actually quite a lot of connection to what the Wurundjeri people were doing. And when we talk about being on country is an amazing, I think, a very beautiful way of thinking about our lives and our work, because it's not just about thinking about yourself. It's actually about thinking about where you live, the connectivity to all of the other things that you share in that environment. And I'd like to think the Botanic Gardens is an incredibly rich, biodiverse place. And it's not only for the people to visit, it's for all those animals and bugs and invertebrates to actually live and have a healthy life as well. And when we build landscapes around people that are actually not just about people, and they're not about the pretense of showing off what they've got or own, you're actually feeling much better in those spaces. And the connection to nature happens in those spaces, like it happens in wild landscapes. So if you're sitting in a landscape that isn't pretentious, in other words, it's got grasses, it's got ground covers, it might even be a little bit unkept, but it's actually got that piece which is about everything, not about just us humans. And being on country was very much about that concept. So this is beautiful Dan and Ben, who are Indigenous people, men that actually do a lot of the welcome and acknowledgement to country in the Botanic Gardens. And the Botanic Gardens has been offering an acknowledgement of country for over 20 years. And it's still a place that I think a lot of tourists can come to actually start to connect with that deeper history. And Melbourne doesn't do this very well. We have an invisible connection to a lot of our deeper history. And I think that's changing, and it's exciting that we're in a place that's changing. So the Botanic Gardens set up in 1846, Charles Latrobe, and again, it started as a collection of plants. Von Mueller arrives, and that collection of plants goes next level, because Von Mueller is this amazing scientist. He's collecting plants from all around the world. He's discovering a whole lot of plants in and around Australia, and he's growing them all in the Botanic Gardens. But he doesn't care what the place looks like. So he gets sacked in 1870, and William Guilfoyle arrives. And William Guilfoyle comes from Sydney. His father was an Englishman, garden designer, and he comes and designs this garden in a really beautiful way. He designs it so that it's a garden that all sticks together. It's like one garden. When you go into many botanic gardens around the world, they are designed from the plants up. So you go to the Camellia collection, and then you might go to the Arid collection. And so there was no overall design. But what William Guilfoyle did, he designed that garden as one garden. So all of those spaces interconnect. All of those pathways interconnect. And then the plant collections have to fit within that design. And that is a masterstroke. And he built and designed that garden over 30 years, which is, again, quite extraordinary. He held that vision and created this garden. Weirdly, he wanted that garden to look like an English landscape, sitting right here in the middle of a harsh Australian landscape. So we love what he did, but actually to keep it going is quite a challenge. So with climate change and with the temperature rising, we are wanting to actually maintain the beauty of that garden, which looks like an English landscape, but we're actually changing that garden. As we all sleep, we are changing the plants in that garden without anybody knowing it. So all the trees, as they reach their maturity or need to be replaced, we're replacing them with trees that come from Mexico, from South America, from warmer climates. All of the shrub layer, you will not see an azalea or hardly a rhododendron. You won't see birch trees. You won't see many magnolias, because these things have finished in Melbourne. The climate is actually saying we can't grow them anymore without pouring lots of water onto them, without pouring lots of chemicals onto them, or without pouring lots of fertilizer onto them. And we don't want to do that anymore. We're actually wanting to grow plants that actually fit with the environment that they're living in. So it's not an artificial construct. What was amazing about Guilfoyle is he designed it in what we call the capability brown style. So he's used these beautiful flowing lawns and these void spaces, which is the lawns and the lakes, and then the mass is the planting. And so it all works together very beautifully as this relationship between mass and void. And this theatre where you walk through a mass and then it opens up into a beautiful view. And it's a series of those spaces, and you just ebb and flow through the Botanic Gardens. And it's incredibly beautiful. But it doesn't mean you have to grow azaleas, rhododendrons, and magnolias. We can maintain and hold that design, but by using a whole different type of plant material. And we call this process landscape succession. And that landscape succession is where we are transitioning that landscape slowly over time into a much more resilient garden. And I'm really pleased to say that we've been at this for the last 10 or so years, and most people wouldn't even know it's happening. So that's part of my work, is to keep the integrity of the history there, but also build a garden. And I'm doing this not on my own, of course, but with a whole lot of colleagues, build a garden that is going to take Melbourne into the next 100, 200 years. And it's a very, very special place. So it sits behind, so these are shots that I'm showing you, but it sits behind these plans, landscape succession, which I just mentioned, the master plan, which actually sets out the projects that we're trying to achieve, and we engage with all our stakeholders, and we actually set out a very clear plan every 10 years, and we've just done the last one, which is 20 years. And I don't think I'll be around for the next one, which is good. But it actually sets out what we're trying to achieve, but it brings in all our stakeholders. So the City of Melbourne, Heritage Victoria, the Friends of South Yarra, the ASV group, we all sign off on the direction that we want to head. And a lot of people may think that that garden doesn't change, but actually over the last 20 or 30 years, this garden has changed enormously. But we would like to think that it's changed without affecting that integrity, that historical integrity. So what we've really focused on over the last 20 odd years is trying to change people's experience and trying to also create a garden that appeals to a different demographic. And this has included things like the Children's Garden, Guilfoyle's Volcano, the Fern Gully, and we've invested heavily into these projects, which is now changing the experience. So it's less of an adult language space where you come in and you walk around and you learn about the gardens. We are now really wanting to switch people in to having immersive experiences. So actually creating places where people come and stay and experience the health and well-being benefits that a garden can provide. So I'm just going to show you, I keep walking into the zone. Again, I'm going to just turn that off. If I can just move that, thanks. Joe, I think everyone's hearing me okay, aren't they? Yeah. So 20 years ago, I was able to design the children's garden, and this was a different experience, and it was quite courageous of the board to do this. But this was a garden that actually was a nature-based garden. It was a garden where children would come in and just come into a place with their own imagination. So there's no toys in here. There's no playground. This is basically plants doing all the work. But what it does, it connects to children's imagination. And we realised that we didn't have to create a garden with lots of bits and pieces. And I went to America and Europe, and I was kind of quite appalled by what was going on in America in children's gardens, because you walked into a children's garden that they'd spent $4 million on, and they had little trains running around and they had plastic plants that could pull apart. But it was obviously designed by an adult in their heads. But when we realised we stepped back from that and you create something that is very open and unprescribed, the children then choose their own adventure. All you've got to do is create a place of history and excitement. So the children's garden has been an absolute joy. So we did a design. We worked with a number of schools to try and work out what experiences they were really up for. And we created a garden where everything literally is driven by the plants. So we created a whole series of different planted experiences. Water plays a role here. This was pretty well the day the garden opened. But this garden is now 20 years old, and we get 330,000 children a year coming into this garden and actually just experiencing nature play. And the idea that sits behind that is that these children love this space. They love coming to this space. And so as adults, they start to develop a connection to that landscape. So that when they're adults, they're starting to think about perhaps better decisions when it comes to the environment. So this isn't you don't get quick results from a space like this. You invest over $1 million. The Ian Potter Foundation gave us the money to build this garden 20 years ago. And it's putting its second generation of children through now, which is very exciting. And we celebrated its 20 years just last year. So it's become part of parents' lives that live in Melbourne. And I'm pleased to say that it's a very healthy, thriving landscape. What we did when we built this landscape is we built it like a sports field. So it's quite sophisticated, even though it's just a whole lot of natural plants and different experiences. We changed the whole soil profile. We built it on a sand-based profile. So just like the MCG, these days you don't see any mud, you don't see any soil compaction, and the plants can thrive in there. And so we thought about it very carefully. It took us 3 years to build. It took us over 12 months to design, and it's still going really strong after 20 years. So, yeah, it's exciting. And more importantly, it's creating immersive experiences for children. So when you go into a bamboo forest, the light changes, the sound changes, the textures change, and for a child, it becomes this magical place. So you don't have to do anything other than make sure that the plants are going to thrive there. And that's kind of gold in many ways. About 14 years ago, I was able to design Guilfoyle's volcano. And Guilfoyle's volcano has an amazing story that sits behind it and sits to the kind of history of Melbourne. So this is an amazing image because this is in 1870. And this part of the Botanic Gardens is the Von Mueller piece. And you can just see he's planting plants everywhere and there's no kind of sense of space. But this is at the stage where William Guilfoyle's been working for about a year. And you can start to see that he's clearing these areas. And this is the building of the volcano or the reservoir. So he builds a reservoir or a turkey's nest to sit at the highest part of the gardens. He's going to pump water up from the Yarra and he's going to gravity feed all the hose points. Because in 1870, Melbourne was experiencing some horrible drought conditions. The gardens couldn't expand. Melbourne's suburbs of South Yarra were on the Yan Yean system. And for a while, our Melbourne Botanic Gardens connected to it. But every time we turned the tap on, the people in South Yarra couldn't shower. So water was a huge issue back in 1870. Von Mueller had been using orphan boys and water carts to try and keep the plants alive. So it was a major problem. Guilfoyle comes in there, thinks he's going to solve all the problems, and he builds this turkey nest dam, lines it with beautiful bluestone, and fills it with water by pumping up from the Yarra. What happens though, that they then blast the falls, and all of a sudden the water's salty. So they then create a pipe and they build just above Dites Falls, which is the next falls up in Collingwood. They build a new water exchange there and they build a pipe, which is part Cooper's pipe, part above ground. They run it all the way through Collingwood, Richmond, and they deliver it up to the volcano. And then they deliver it down to Albert Park Lake because the Botanic Gardens had become this incredibly important social place for Melburnians and they were investing heavily to keep that landscape green. So we go on the water, we use the Guilfoyle volcano up until about 1930, and then we go on to Melbourne water. So from 1930, the volcano gets locked up and it looks like this. Nobody can actually even see it. It's just a body of water. The gardeners occasionally go in there and fish, but it just becomes this secret part of the Botanic Gardens that nobody knows about except the people living up in that flat on the top of Anderson Street. So we get $1 million from the Myer Foundation and they allow us to redesign and rebuild what we now call Guilfoyle's volcano. And we build it to look like a volcano, believe it or not, because Guilfoyle was inspired by the volcanic landscapes of the South Pacific. So this was my drawing back in 2010, and this is our build. All of a sudden, it becomes a place where people with all abilities can get up into the top. And we're going to build a garden which is showing people that they can use succulent narrow material in a really good way, and you don't need to water it, and it can sit there and survive with very few inputs, no fertilizer, no water. And so this is the volcano the day we opened it. And the planting design here was a lot of fun. And we had $250,000 to spend on plants, which was pretty exciting for me. But we're wrapping this garden in these arid and succulent plants. And again, people love this space. It's become really a lot of tan trackers will run around the tan track and come and do a loop around the volcano and head out. But it's been a really, really great garden to be involved in. But what's really important about the volcano is that while it's an interesting landscape to look at, it plays an incredibly integral role in the treatment of our water. And so what we do as part of this project, we diverted an extra 70 meg of water off the South Yarra suburbs. We brought that into our lake system, highly polluted water, and we moved that around our lake system. So the entire body of water gets circulated every 80 days. And we run that water through floating islands. So those 5 things there, which were meant to look a bit like a Monet lily pad, They are islands that float, that have been planted with, and as the water pushes through that, it strips the high nitrates and phosphates out of that water, and the plants take that up, and we harvest that plant material. So that's it today. And you can see those floating islands growing very well, but they are doing the work. They are stripping that water of all those high nitrates and pollutants, and we pull that material out. So every 12 months, we cut all that material off and we put that in our compost, and that gets composted and goes back onto the garden bed. So it's a closed system, but that's pulling all those nutrients out of the water. We circulate that water and aerate that water, and we have never had healthier water in the Botanic Gardens, which goes to the heart of the health of this place. And we think about the biodiversity that it brings. A lot of it's to do with the water health and that system of treatment. The other thing around the volcano, we used a lot of native plants as well, just to bring some sense of movement and change, and to obviously celebrate our native flora. So this is just some of the planting design on the volcano. There's a beautiful Echium wilfredii. Again, very common, Crassula falcata. It's growing in a lot of our parents' gardens. But again, by putting these plants in a stronger design, they have real appeal. And that is the harvesting of the plant material off the top of the volcano. It's a big job, it's a tough job, but yeah, we do it every year. You're going to wrap me up, aren't you, Rob? But I've got a bit to go. Volcano as it is today. I've just moved through a little bit. So I want to just talk about another project we've done in the gardens recently, and this is the White Oak project. So the White Oak, in 2020, she completely started to crack. So we wrapped it in a big safety fence, and then 3 days later, she fell apart. She absolutely lay herself bare. 165-year-old Quercus alba sitting on our oak lawn. And so she fell, and it was pretty awesome to see an oak tree like that on the ground. In fact, we had this massive outpouring of people who started to come in and visit the tree as it was. And when you see something like that so big on the ground, and you as a human, there's something about the awesomeness of nature when you have that experience. But rather than get rid of this tree, through the design process, we were able to talk the management into keeping the tree there and seeing what might come of it. And again, working a little bit with the idea of the way Indigenous people work in caring for country, we didn't clean it all up and just plant a new tree. We actually allowed people to continue to come in and visit the tree, and we recorded some of those stories. And then I was able to put a design together which started to work with the nature of the tree, which is actually the story of the tree. And it's the story of what's happened to the tree. Whereas what we're good at is getting rid of this stuff. So that was just some of the angles and the shots of the tree falling. These are some of the people that came to visit the tree, and we recorded these stories. I was able to get a drone photo of how the tree branches had fallen. Already we'd lost a lot of material that had been cleaned up. And then literally I was able to scale that drawing up. And then just literally by moving the parts of that tree and repositioning them around the trunk, not losing the trunk, we were able to create a gathering space, which actually allows that tree to continue to give. And so we now have a meeting place which honours the tree, but also allows people to gather, and that tree continues to give as a tree. And that's a drone photo of it just not so long ago. And I worked with a furniture maker, and we were able to cut seats into the tree, and we completely wrapped it with indigenous vegetation, which is that deeper history, and it's that biodiversity piece. We've been able to identify over 15 species of fungi that have come in and started to take over and eat that wood, which is part of that process. So it's been a really successful garden, and people are gathering there. And what's really beautiful is a lot of the welcome to countries and acknowledgement to country start here under a European tree, because it's a shared vision and it's about caring for country. And that's really lovely. Now, Robert.
Before you go, could I just ask you to show the photo of the Alfred?
Yeah, I'll just get onto that. This is our working with country this year. We did a garden at Mifkas. We worked with the Wurundjeri people, and we created a garden which was about the story of the eels and the story of the birds, Bunjil, And we have a process where we have to go through, create a design, we talk to the Wurundjeri people, we build a garden, we have a smoking ceremony that opens MIFGS now. That's one of the builders' elders. This is the garden. We had the crows were black umbrellas. The herons were grey umbrellas. And these are some of the shots of the garden. And this is the story of the eels. 60,000 years, the eels have been moving through the wetlands and back out to sea. And we're in eel season at the moment. So that was appropriate. I'm just going to quickly go through Global Gardens. Global Gardens started with Moira Kelly here, who was trying to get children out of Gaza to heal them and to bring them back to Melbourne. She approached myself and a couple of others because of the children's garden in Melbourne. So we took on this project of building a children's garden in the Gaza Strip. And I've been lucky enough to visit Gaza 2 or 3 times. Bernie works with me on this project, as does a whole lot of other volunteers. That's Gaza pre-war. Gaza is a very, very difficult place just to even get into. So you can only imagine what it must be like now. Most kids by the age of 6 have experienced 3 significant wars and trauma. You can only imagine how that's escalated in the last piece of war. This is the conference group that we set up in Gaza, and they were telling us what they wanted in the garden. So we went into the kinders in Gaza. These are some of the kids around Gaza. And this was the design we built to bring a children's garden to Gaza. But sadly, we've been unable to realise that. But we've designed a smaller space, which we were about to build and ready to go with 2 weeks, in 2 weeks before October the 7th. So this has been devastated, this site. So that's the site that we were gifted. I went into the office of the Hamas, who signed the title to this land and gave us this opportunity to build this garden. Sadly, this has been totally destroyed. We're still talking to Gaza. We're still trying to, we've converted some of our money to humanitarian aid. We've raised $500,000 to build this garden. And we're about to give some more money for children's psychological help, which is what they think is useful. Because we couldn't build Gaza, Global Gardens of Peace started to realise that there are people here in Melbourne, vulnerable communities in Melbourne. This is the VAS community, which Rotary helped us with in getting some funding. These people sit inside most of their life. We built a green room here. We worked with EGA and Bernie and myself, and we designed and built this garden. These are the clients. They're all in wheelchairs. They're all got breathing apparatuses. They can't spend more than about 10 minutes outside. So we built them a green room and a garden that will wrap them in plants and that needs to be looked after and loved. This is our planting day. This is the garden we did in the Alfred Psych Ward. That's the Alfred Psych Ward. These guys come in here and are in here for 12 months, can be as short as 3 months, and that's their experience outside. Yeah, it's outrageous, really. So we were able to get some money from a sister of someone that was in there, and we built 2 really lovely gardens. Bernie's team actually built these gardens, and these are these gardens today. And you go in there, and these people love these gardens, and these gardens are incredibly significant to their experience. And they're just green, you know, but it's just so important. So we are now working in Footscray. We're building a women's garden for Muslim women. And we've worked with the Salam Fest organisation, and we're building a garden in there for about 140,000. And we're also trying to build an indigenous garden in Shepparton at the moment. So you can look us up, you can become more involved, but that's part of the work that we do. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Andrew. I think you can understand the passion that he brings to his job. But Andrew spoke recently at a Rotarians for Bees event out in Box Hill, 140 people there. And he showed those pictures of the Alfred Hospital before and afterwards. And Costa was following him to speak. Costa was so emotional, he was almost crying, saying how important it is that money spent, there's 100 and something thousand, whereas, you know, millions of dollars on infrastructure, 100,000 on a garden, the benefits that can bring. He was incredibly emotional about it. It was amazing. So thank you, Andrew, for all those efforts. It's a brilliant job that you do. No time for questions, unfortunately. We've run a bit over, and apologies for that. But we do have a presentation for you for some socks that you might need to wear shoes with. Thank you. Those are from one of our members, Phil Endersby's organisation, Wilderness Wear. So thanks very much today for Tony Bettini for his reflection, and Robert Fisher. And a reminder, next week we're here at number 35. We've got Mark Allen, who's our guest speaker, Urban Analytics at the University of Melbourne, speaking on the Intelligence Future City Designing for Resilient and Sustainable Communities.